What about Meghan and Harry? Because there are reports that Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and their children could be set to lose their royal titles if and when Prince William becomes monarch. Do you think that's what? Well, that's
I
what will
do.
happen?
I really do feel it will happen, and I think it's important to note that it won't be a revenge play by William. It's very much a reforming play because when he's King William V, when his father passes on, he's the monarch.
The royal family faces its most dangerous internal rupture in decades. Prince Harry has returned to Britain, but not to reconciliation. Instead, he has been met with silence, distance, and what insiders are calling a deliberate rejection by King Charles himself, with pressure mounting from Prince William. A bitter court battle against the British press and the Sussexes now viewed as an institutional risk, the monarchy may have crossed a point of no return. This is not just a family feud, this is the beginning of a new royal war. Prince Harry's arrival in London was meant to be quiet. No grand return, no symbolic walk through palace gates, no carefully staged moment of reconciliation. Instead, what unfolded behind the scenes was something far more consequential, a deliberate and unmistakable distance imposed by the crown itself. According to multiple royal insiders, King Charles III made a conscious decision not to see his youngest son during his visit to the United Kingdom, a move that sent shockwaves through palace corridors and confirmed what many had privately feared. The royal family is no longer merely fractured, it is entrenched in a silent war. The trigger was not a single event, but a convergence of long-running disputes that finally collided at the worst possible moment. Prince Harry's court case against the publisher of the Daily Mail, one of Britain's most powerful media institutions, has become more than a legal battle. It has evolved into a defining symbol of Harry's break from the monarchy's traditional compact with the British establishment. While Harry views the lawsuit as a moral crusade against unlawful press behavior, senior royals increasingly see it as a destabilizing force that drags the monarchy into perpetual controversy. Inside Buckingham Palace, advisors warn the king that any engagement with Harry during active legal proceedings could be interpreted as political interference. Constitutionally, the monarch must remain above such disputes. But those familiar with the decision-making process say the legal justification was only part of the story. The deeper issue was trust, or rather, the absence of it. King Charles, they say, has grown increasingly wary that private interactions with Harry could later surface publicly, intentionally or otherwise, exacerbating an already volatile media environment. Prince William's influence in this moment cannot be overstated. As Prince of Wales and future king, William has assumed a far more assertive role in shaping the monarchy's response to crisis. Sources describe him as increasingly impatient with what he views as a cycle of provocation and reaction driven by the Sussexes. Every interview, every lawsuit, every public grievance, William believes, weakens the institution he is destined to inherit. In private conversations, he has reportedly made it clear that continued accommodation of Harry's public battles is not only unsustainable, but dangerous. The relationship between the brothers, once close, has deteriorated to the point where communication is minimal and heavily managed, if it exists at all. William's frustration is not rooted solely in personal betrayal, insiders say, but in a strategic calculation about survival. The monarchy, already navigating post-Elizabethan transition, economic uncertainty, and declining public trust, cannot afford endless internal drama. In William's view, boundaries are no longer optional, they are necessary. Meghan Markle's absence from the UK has not softened perceptions inside the palace. On the contrary, her continued presence in the narrative, despite being physically removed, reinforces a belief among senior royals that the Sussex saga is unpredictable by design. Years of public accusations, televised interviews, streaming documentaries, and memoir revelations have created a deep-seated conviction within royal circles that private conversations are no longer safe. Whether that belief is justified is almost beside the point. It now shapes every institutional decision. The security dispute has further poisoned any remaining goodwill. Prince Harry has been explicit in his belief that the withdrawal of publicly funded police protection has made it impossible for Meghan and their children to return safely to Britain. He has also stated publicly that this issue has caused a breakdown in communication with his father. Palace officials counter that security decisions are made independently, based on risk assessments, and cannot be influenced by the monarch. This stalemate has become emblematic of the broader conflict. Harry feels abandoned, while the palace insists its hands are legally tied. Royal commentators such as Lady Colin Campbell argue that this outcome was inevitable. In her view, the monarchy reached a threshold long ago, one beyond which continued reconciliation efforts only invited further instability. She and others believe the institution is now in self-preservation mode, prioritizing continuity over sentiment. From that perspective, King Charles's distance from Harry is not an act of cruelty, but of governance. Still, the human cost is undeniable. King Charles is not merely a monarch, he is a father navigating a public breakdown with his son. Those close to him describe a man torn between affection and obligation, deeply saddened by the state of the relationship, but convinced that the crown must come first. By choosing not to meet Harry during the court case, Charles effectively signaled that personal reconciliation cannot occur under the shadow of public confrontation. What makes this moment so significant is its finality. Unlike previous rifts, which carried the faint promise of repair, this one feels structurally embedded. The palace has recalibrated its approach, treating Harry not as a wayward family member, but as an external actor whose decisions carry institutional risk. That shift, once made, is difficult to reverse. Behind closed doors, senior courtiers have reportedly discussed the Sussex situation in terms once reserved for constitutional crises. Media strategy, reputational containment, and long-term planning now dominate conversations that once focused on healing and reintegration. The emphasis has moved from reconciliation to management. For Prince Harry, the consequences are profound. His legal battles continue, but so does his isolation from the family he was born into. Each court appearance reinforces the divide. Each headline deepens the perception that he stands apart from the monarchy rather than alongside it. Whether that was ever his intention is irrelevant to how it is now perceived. This unfolding royal conflict is not loud. There are no shouted accusations from palace balconies, no dramatic proclamations. Instead, it is defined by silence, absence, and calculated distance. And in the world of monarchy, silence often speaks louder than words. What remains unclear is how or if this standoff will end. Will time soften positions? Will legal resolutions open doors to private dialogue? Or has the line been crossed beyond return? What is certain is that the House of Windsor has entered a new phase, one marked by hardened boundaries and diminished hope for unity. This is no longer a family disagreement playing out in public. It is a structural rift between personal grievance and institutional survival. And as the monarchy looks toward its future under King Charles, and eventually King William, the role of Prince Harry within that future appears increasingly uncertain. That uncertainty has become the defining feature of Prince Harry's relationship with the monarchy, and nowhere is it more visible than inside the palace itself, where senior aides now speak of the Sussex situation in terms once reserved for existential threats rather than private family disputes. According to sources with direct knowledge of internal discussions, meetings convened in the weeks leading up to Harry's return to the UK were markedly different in tone from those held in previous years. The language shifted from reconciliation and de-escalation to risk assessment and containment. The question was no longer how to bring Harry back into the fold, but how to ensure that his actions would not continue to destabilize the institution. At the heart of those discussions was a growing fear that Prince Harry's legal strategy, media presence, and public rhetoric had become inseparable. Palace officials reportedly expressed concern that every legal filing, every courtroom appearance, and every subsequent interview created a feedback loop that prolonged the crisis. Even when Harry framed his actions as personal or principled, the effect was institutional. The monarchy, bound by tradition and constitutional restraint, found itself unable to respond directly, creating an imbalance that left it perpetually on the defensive. King Charles, advisors say, was presented with stark options. He could attempt another quiet reconciliation, risking accusations of interference and further media fallout, or he could draw a firm line, accepting the personal pain that choice would bring. Those close to the king described the decision as one of the most difficult of his reign so far. Charles has long prided himself on empathy and bridge building, yet, as monarch, he has learned that compassion without boundaries can be weaponized against the crown. Prince William's voice in these deliberations was steady and uncompromising. Insiders say he warned that the monarchy was approaching a tipping point, where continued engagement with Harry's disputes would normalize instability. William's concern was not merely about the present moment, but about precedent. If the institution appeared to bend repeatedly to one member's grievances, it would invite future challenges, eroding the monarchy's authority from within. For William, whose future reign will be judged on strength and clarity, ambiguity was no longer acceptable. This internal shift helps explain why Harry's return to London unfolded with such emotional coldness. The absence of a meeting with his father was not a scheduling mishap or a bureaucratic oversight. It was the physical manifestation of a strategic recalibration. To palace officials, visibility equals validation. Denying that visibility was a way of signaling that the monarchy would not be drawn into public confrontation on Harry's terms. Yet from Harry's perspective, the silence was devastating. Friends of the Duke say he interpreted the lack of contact as confirmation that he had been effectively cast out. His belief that the institution values optics over family has only hardened with time. Those close to him insist that his legal battles are driven by deeply personal trauma, particularly his conviction that the British press played a decisive role in his mother's death. In Harry's mind, this is not a vendetta, but unfinished business. The tragedy, royal observers note, is that both sides believe they are acting defensively. Harry believes he is protecting his family and honoring his mother's legacy. The monarchy believes it is protecting the crown and ensuring continuity. These parallel narratives rarely intersect, leaving little room for mutual understanding. Each move by one side is interpreted by the other as confirmation of bad faith. Meghan Markle's role in this ongoing conflict remains one of the most contentious and least openly discussed aspects of the saga. Within palace walls, her name still provokes unease. While officials are careful to avoid overt criticism, the prevailing view is that the Sussex brand has become inseparable from public disclosure. The fear is not necessarily that Meghan herself will speak, but that any interaction involving Harry could be reframed, repackaged, or repurposed in ways the palace cannot control. This perception has created an environment in which avoidance is seen as safer than engagement. Senior courtiers have reportedly advised that even well-intentioned gestures carry unacceptable risk. A private conversation could be mischaracterized. A brief meeting could fuel weeks of speculation. In an age of constant scrutiny, silence is viewed as the least damaging option, even if it appears cruel. This logic has increasingly governed how the monarchy manages not just Harry, but all sensitive internal matters. The security dispute remains the emotional core of Harry's grievance. His insistence that he cannot safely bring his family to the UK without state-funded protection has become both a practical barrier and a symbolic one. To Harry, security represents belonging proof that he is still part of the national fabric. To the palace, it is a procedural issue governed by independent bodies and legal frameworks. The inability to reconcile these interpretations has frozen progress. What makes the situation more volatile is Harry's willingness to speak openly about these issues. His public statements, while heartfelt, have had the unintended effect of hardening palace resistance. Each disclosure reinforces fears that private grievances will inevitably become public narratives. As a result, the very transparency Harry believes is necessary has made discretion increasingly impossible. Royal analysts point out that the monarchy has faced internal conflicts before, but rarely with such sustained intensity or global amplification. The combination of legal action, media engagement, and familial estrangement has created a crisis that defies traditional resolution mechanisms. There are no clear intermediaries left. Trusted aides who once shuttled messages between the brothers are said to have stepped back, wary of becoming entangled in a dispute with no clear endpoint. For King Charles, the implications extend beyond his relationship with Harry. His reign is still defining itself, seeking to balance modernization with continuity. Being perceived as weak or indecisive in the face of internal dissent could undermine his authority. at the same time being seen as unforgiving risks, alienating a public increasingly sensitive to mental health and family trauma. Every decision carries reputational consequences. Prince William, meanwhile, is already being shaped by this conflict. His handling of the Sussex situation is viewed by many as a preview of his future kingship. Supporters see his firmness as evidence of leadership. Critics argue it reflects an inflexibility that could widen divisions. Either way, William's stance has become central to the monarchy's current posture. As months pass, the possibility of a quiet reconciliation appears to recede further. The longer silence endures, the more normalized it becomes. What once would have been shocking is now treated as routine. Harry's absence from royal life, from ceremonies, from private family moments, is no longer an anomaly. It is the status quo. This normalization is perhaps the most telling indicator of how deeply entrenched the divide has become. Institutions adapt quickly when survival is at stake. The monarchy has adjusted to a reality in which Prince Harry exists outside its operational framework. That adjustment, once made, is difficult to undo. The public, meanwhile, is left to interpret fragments. A court appearance here, a statement there, a conspicuous absence at a family event. Each fragment feeds speculation, but none offer closure. The story continues to unfold in real time, shaped by